Hello and welcome to another Legions Imperialis video. Before I get started, I wanted to share some channel updates. These videos were started simply as a way to share my hobby experience, and I have received some overwhelmingly positive support. I've rebranded the channel to Battle Wagon, and I'm going to make the push for 500 subscribers. So it would be extremely helpful if you would like and subscribe my work. Going forward, I'm looking to release a new video about once every 2 weeks. And with that out of the way, let's discuss mustering an army, specifically choosing a Legions Astartes as an Allied Contingent. When mustering an army, page 126 of the core rulebook states that there are 4 steps. First, you declare an allegiance, then you choose a primary army list, assemble compulsory formations, and then you complete your army. And we'll look at that in a little bit, but it's kind of in a weird order, actually. The first step is to declare allegiance, that being either loyalist or traitor. Right now, there is only one unit in the game, one detachment, that has an allegiance, and that is the Warlord Sinister Psi Titan. At 675 points, this technically means that allegiance doesn't matter for any armies under 2,250 points, because you can only take that Titan as an Allied Contingent. Notably, as well, this is the only model with the Sinistraminus Tenebrae heavy beam weapon. However, Allegiance opens the possibility for numerous future updates, and it's kind of an exciting thing that we can take a look at in the future and come back and reevaluate. The next steps focus on building the core of your army, which are not the focus of this video. I want to talk about allied formations and allied contingents. In step 2, you choose your primary army list, and there are plenty of existing tier lists for Legion traits and even individual vehicles that you can view anywhere on the internet. In step 3, you assemble compulsory formations, which will vary depending on the organization chart or formations you have chosen. There's not as many, but there are some reviews about which formations are going to be viable and competitive. For example, the Pioneer formation seems to be a very powerful one that people are theorizing is going to see a lot of play competitively. For each formation of your primary list, you're allowed to take one allied formation. I want to talk in detail about potential allies for your chosen primary army, so we have to make a few assumptions first. It may seem at first like you can spend 30% of your list on allies, but it's a little more tricky than that. A player must first spend at least 70 points of the available from the agreed points limit on formations and detachments from their primary army list. If you want to take a Warlord Battle Titan in a 2,000 point list, you have to spend exactly 1,400 points and not a point more and not a point less. Additionally, we have to evaluate and take into consideration some subjective alternatives. Choosing allies assumes that we are checking for the viability and usefulness of branching out from your primary army list. So for a Solar Auxilia list, do you gain anything beneficial by choosing a specific legion beyond the combat stats of a specific detachment? As such, I'm going to simply add a rating to each legion as better, equal to, worse. You can also take allied strategic assets, this being Knights and Titans. In a 500 point list, you cannot fit any of them in there. In 1,000 points, you can have 300 points of allies if you spend the 700. You can now start to take any of the single knights, but without any armigers. 1,500 is 450 points in allies, and that opens up the Warhound, the Direwolf, Reaver Titans, things like that. And because this is kind of your opening point for a lot of those Titans, this is my preferred practice point for games. If you want to try out some of those additional allies, if you want to try out formations, 1,500 points feels like a good introductory game. At 2,000 points, you can now put 600 point allies, and that opens up the Warlord Nemesis at 525 and the Warlord Battle Titan at 600. At 2,500 points, that's where you can start to use anything. You're getting the 750 points of allies, which includes the last Warlord Sinister and both the War Master Titans. So if you're looking to do a full game, obviously the book recommends the 3,000 points, but you could bring that back to 2,500 points because that lets you use any of the units in the game. Again, 1,500 for practice, anything over 2,500 for full games. And once you get into the 3,000 points, it's a lot easier to put in those 750 point allies because of that 70-30 percentage split. When it comes to establishing a baseline allied formation for Solar Auxilia, I'm not going to make any specific builds for the comparison, but rather focus on some archetypes. There are a few formation types than the Astartes has. The air superiority archetype picks either a pioneer company or 2 sub-cohorts with minimum compulsory detachments in order to have 2 air support slots. Solar Auxilia air support units are extremely powerful, and that is seen everywhere, and you can see that in a lot of my previous videos. The armored gun line archetype focuses on long-range tanks, typically massing those with vanquisher cannons. The assault infantry archetype focuses on either 1 pioneer company to gain deployment advantages for its infantry, or 2 sub-cohorts to overwhelm your opponent with efficiently powerful infantry. Without further ado, let's get into the legions. The first legion, the Dark Angels, are Fidelitas Constatus, or constant loyalty, as it would typically translate from Latin. And they have the formations of the hexagrammaton. In that, once you meet the requirements of 3 detachment types, 1 detachment type of your choice gains a specific trait. Infantry gain Phosphex Implacable, Cavalry gain Outflank, Vehicles gain Nimble, things like that. In order to activate this special rule, you'll want to take minimum supporting detachments within that formation, like a single Rhino for 10 points, or even an air support, maybe a single Xiphon or something, because that does count as a vehicle. Then you would overload the rest of your formation with a detachment of a single type that usually benefits from that trait. Using a Dark Angels infantry formation with Implacable for objectives is extremely strong and likely to be better than a lot of the additional allied contingents that you could take. Cavalry are yet to be determined. However, I think that vehicles with the Nimble trait would typically be worse. The third legion, Emperor's Children, is a Traitoris Perdita, and that translates roughly to the Lost Traitor. The Exemplars of War ability lets you re-roll initiative when they are one of your allied formations, and it simply requires 1. This is a nice versatile rule because it doesn't dictate which detachments you must bring, and it's a great way to add additional favorite units or air support detachments that rarely benefit from bonuses anyway. I'm giving Emperor's Children a rating of better, mostly because you can gain an advantage simply for painting some guys a little bit differently. Even though this is a simple reroll, when used at the right time, this can be a powerful ability. I actually feel like this is one of the best allies to splash into any army. The 4th Legion, Iron Warriors, is also a Traitoris Perdita, the Lost Traitor, and their rule is the Bitter End, which has an increased tactical strength. Infantry and walkers increase their tactical strength by 1 when determining which player controls a neutral objective. In addition, they effectively have +2 tactical strength if within their own deployment zone. The specific text on these that is relevant is objective markers outside either player's deployment zone are referred to as neutral objectives, and an objective is not contested if the controlling player has at least double the tactical strength within 3 inches of their opponent. A full evaluation of this rule requires a detailed look at the exact missions, which I'm not really about to do at this time, although this is a good place to point out that issue 493 of White Dwarf does include an additional mission that's not found in the rulebook. The downside of this rule is that in order to utilize the +2 bonus, your infantry are typically not affecting the battlefield throughout the game, as they're going to be in your own deployment zone. My recommendation for Iron Warriors as an ally is to skew Contemptor Dreadnoughts, use their 22-inch twin-linked las cannons, or give Implacable the Terminators for some building objectives. All in all, I give them an equal to rating. They're not overly powerful, but you can get some good units within a formation. Next up is the 5th Legion, White Scars, and this is actually the Legion that I am primarily playing. But before I delve into the White Scars, I wanted to take a moment to talk about Legion forces that break the loyalty scheme. In the rulebook, they are listed as Fidelitas Skindo, and this means split loyalty. I'm not huge into the lore, but there are numerous examples of legions with forces whose loyalty lies opposite. White scores are considered loyalists in the Horus heresy, but have a split loyalty. The 5th Legion Brotherhood of the Great Eye, 905th Expeditionary Fleet, for example, is recorded as openly fighting alongside Horus's forces. Another situation like this can be found throughout the conflict of Istvan III. These examples are a great way to legitimize the use of loyalist legions alongside traitor legions, either it being traitor primary, loyalist primary, or splashing additional formations in with something that kind of breaks the mold. Their special rule is Born in the Saddle, which gives a better jinx save. And I actually think this is a little bit worse than some of the alternatives that you can get. Until additional detachments are released with Jink, the primary use for White Scars as an ally is to focus on air support detachments. An example aerial assault formation comes in well over 600 points after all the minimum compulsory choices and just a single Xiphon or Fire Raptor in each air support. In order to effectively use White Scars as an ally, you typically need to play the 3,000 point standard game and likely won't have any other allies at all, especially not Titans. In the future, White Scars could improve once bikes and speeders are released, which bring that allied point value down. The 6th Legion, Space Wolves, is a Fidelitas Sine Recurso, loyalty without recourse. Their Preternational Causes ability stops infiltrate within 16 inches and outflank within 8 inches. Again, this is a nice versatile rule because it doesn't dictate which detachments you must bring. It's a great way to add additional favorite units, as it affects all unit types equally. I'm giving Space Wolves a better rating because mostly you can gain an advantage simply for painting some guys differently. Having a small formation of Space Wolves as an ally can be a great way to zone out enemies while still maintaining the faction identity of your primary army. Notable threats with Infiltrate are the Ravengard, Alpha Legion, the Direwolf Scout Titan, and Solar Auxilia Pioneer Company, all of which are likely to be very powerful and found often in the meta, making Space Wolves the ally of choice for many of the anti-meta armies, and something I will personally be considering. Dark Angels should be getting some outflank cavalry, possibly in the form of bikes, which means that you'll likely want mobile units that can move up and protect the flank, rather than bastions or mobile detachments that would be sitting on your back line. Notably, this ability does not actually stop or affect Deep Strike. The 7th Legion is the Imperial Fists, a popular one in my local community. Fidelitas Totalis, total loyalty. If an Imperial Fist infantry detachment is issued with a first fire order, certain weapon models gain the accurate trait. Even though taking an Imperial Fist as an ally restricts the benefits to infantry, this could be an excellent source of additional firepower. This could be a big buff to regular legionaries, or for infantry that want to garrison a building and wait out the fight. The real power comes when taking missile launchers. Take, for example, a Legion Demi Company focused on 3 support detachments of 8 Missile Marines. For just 425 points, you can get 48 accurate dice with a threat range of 38 inches ignoring cover coming out of rhinos, or 24 shots at AP-1 if you want anti-tank rounds, and that's on turn 1. The only downside is getting 24 stands of official Missile Marines. All in all, they're better. The 8th Legion of Night Lords is Traitoris Perdita as well, Lost Traitor. While I personally think that Night Lords are rather poor among the traits for a primary army, I think they're actually okay as an ally. Versatile because the rule works with all units types equally and doesn't dictate exactly which detachments. However, you may want to focus on air support or long-range anti-infantry. This is also a great way to add favorite units. If you make a formation dedicated to hunting down an opponent's commander, their ability is Seeds of Descent. Whenever you kill an HQ unit with a Night Lords model, that kill causes hits to nearby detachments. If you get to do that successfully, you might be able to get a decent swing of hits. Rather than marching your army out directly, you may want to start off maybe a turn or two later. Let the battle unfold a bit, and the armies be thinned out. This game is very deadly, And if you can keep your Night Lords in a good position and keep them stronger, once the battle thins out, you should be able to get that strike onto the opponent's headquarters unit pretty effectively. All in all, I give this one an equal to. Although it's probably worse. The Legion Blood Angels, the 9th Legion, is a Fidelitas Constatus, constant loyalty. Their ability is in Carmine Fury. A Blood Angel's detachment gets a 3-inch move after winning an engagement, and any models that may move into base contact. Then, if the detachment engages an enemy that is in combat but is yet to fight, it may join to fight again this round. I don't have a lot to say about this rule that hasn't already been said. I find it situational. It's probably lackluster at best. Close combat is deadly, however, so if you manage to pull it off, it can be very powerful. If you are dedicated to playing Blood Angels as an ally, you'll want a melee-centric formation full of Dreadnoughts, Assault Marines, Terminators. Pretty basic. All in all, they're worse. The 10th Legion is Iron Hands. They have a 2-part rule, first being improving the Feel No Pain to also affect light AT weapons. This can be a huge bonus to the durability of infantry. However, the downside is that you currently have to be within 4 inches of the Legion command model. Note that it does not say wholly within, so you can get away with only part of a model. One good tactic that I've seen is to have the Medicae model garrisoned into a building in order to extend the trait to within 4 inches of the building itself. When a whole infantry detachment won't fit within that 4-inch bubble, a good strategy is to assign hits to the models that are. That way they can benefit from the Feel No Pain when applicable. And if the weapons being shot, or if the hits do not have light or light AT, then you assign it to the ones that are outside of 4 inches. This is especially good when those models are Terminators embedded within a Legion tactical detachment because of the additional save. Remember that Rapier Batterers and Tarantulas are also considered infantry and benefit from that Medicae rule, giving them Feel No Pain. This first part of the Legion special rule encourages multiple formations, or in the case we're interested in as an ally, a single, tight-knit group of infantry. Once your infantry base is established, you can fill out the rest of the formation, and typically we're going to want to see some vehicles here, because vehicles in first fire resist the AP by 1. Specifically, vehicles, super heavy vehicles, when they have a sitting first fire order. While the most obvious use of this ability is to have long-range tanks in first fire to resist your opponent's first fire, I think there's a case to be made for keeping air support detachments on the battlefield with hover mode and in first fire for some durability. For example, your Thunderhawks or any other Legions Astartes flyers, because they all have hover, being able to negate the -1 AP on the dreaded Sky Strike missiles can be good in the right circumstances. All in all, as long as you aren't wanting to field walkers or bastions, the Iron Hands can be a solid ally. They're equal to, if not better. The 12th Legion, World Leaders, are Traidores Perdita, Lost Trader as well. Their ability is Incarnate Violence. Reroll 1d6 of their combat dice. This special rule may become more prominent once Cavalry are released. However, Leviathan Dreadnoughts with Rend, Terminators with their +4 close assault factor, perform really well with this rule. Because the detachment types are limited, a player is almost forced to focus their formation on fighting engagements. This doesn't mean using an ally of World Leaders forces you to make a one-note army meant to blind the assault. Notable strategies often include any of the 3 transports for early assaults and fast redeployment of close combat infantry. I actually feel that a formation of World Leader infantry and walkers can be a good screen for a primary army. In other game systems, like Star Wars Legion, this role would be described as a linebacker unit dedicated to stopping an opponent's charge or close combat threat. The versatility of World Leaders is that you can decide on the battlefield, and that's why I think World Leaders are possibly better than any standard alternative, instead of just equal to. The 13th Ultramarines Legion, Fidelitas Constatus as well. Their ability is interlocking tactics, so they can reroll hit rolls of 1 after certain conditions are met. Essentially, when a detachment hits with a weapon, all detachments get to reroll 2 hit rolls of 1. The big question I'm awaiting a clarification from GW is the exact definition of discarded. For example, when a weapon with the light trait hits a vehicle, is it completely discarded or does the special rule take effect? The current understanding is that the light trait, or discarded definition more specifically, still means the hit went off, and this is because of an excerpt on the discarded definition, which says you do not move to the damage step or wounding step. So it does work. The Ultramarines special rule affects all unit types, which means that it is versatile in allowing formation types. However, because their special rule affects all detachments, this special rule benefits primary armies quite a bit more than using them as an ally. Notably, weapons fired in the movement phase, such as interceptor or point defense, activate this ability for the remainder of the round, even for future shots by those firing units. So if you bring in an interceptor like a Xiphon or something, and then later on they actually get to shoot their missiles at the same target or their rotary gun or things like that, they can still benefit from their own interceptor ability, which is kind of a neat little trick that I've not seen a lot of people talk about. As an ally, the seemingly most effective tactic is to create a single formation with a dedicated purpose, either anti-tank or anti-infantry, to complement your primary army. In fact, I would argue that the Ultramarines are one of the best for taking down and hunting Titans with concentrated firepower. My personal preference is to create a multiple spawn unit, or MSU list, in the form of a Demini company, led by point defense Havoc launchers, mounted on rhinos, because they can cause hits before first fire or advancing fire takes them out. Once a hit is activated and activates the special rule, you can unload with a large, long-range detachments, maybe indirect firing quad launcher rapiers or anything with a las cannon. All in all, I initially gave them an equal to, but maybe they're actually a little bit better than I give them credit for. The 14th Legion is the Death Guard, Traitoris Perdita as well, and their rule is the Sons of Barbarous, immune to hits from dangerous terrain, and if their army consists of at least one Death Guard formation, before deployment, a player may pick 2 areas of terrain to become dangerous. 2 structures can be selected in place of a single area of terrain. There are several rules intricacies for Death Guard that I've seen debated and am waiting to hear from GW on. I'll discuss those briefly. Number 1, the raw consensus is that I've seen you are limited to only 2 structures. You may not do 4 structures instead of 2 areas. It does specifically say 2 structures instead of 1 area. Number 2 is dangerous structures stack the -1 and any structure to hit modifiers. And this one actually seems fine because there's little difference from going to a -2 to a -3 when shooting at a unit inside like a Civitas structure, for example, since a 6 is always a hit. And third, I'm not convinced either way on this one, but I've seen arguments that adding dangers to terrain effectively turns off any cover save that it may have granted. But again, I don't know which way to go on that one. I want an official ruling from GW. Until we get some definitive clarifications, I suggest you talk with your opponent, maybe message TOs ahead of time to discuss these interactions. Having multiple formations has no effect on the amount of dangerous terrain they take, so it can be a decent ally, rather simply on which models may be affected by that dangerous terrain. A single Death Guard formation as an ally allows you to place dangerous terrain in or near a target objective, which you can then focus on with that portion of your army. This can be especially good if you take sturdy units that can withstand some shooting, like Terminators or things like that, especially if you're planning to destrict them favorably. Most of the tables I've seen include primarily buildings, but if area terrain ever becomes popular, you might be able to hide long-range vehicles against charging units. I've chosen equal to in this case because Death Guards seem like thematic playstyle to accomplish in-game objectives, more so than other formations that can do it the same thing just fine. It's just a different way of accomplishing the same goal. The 15th Legion, Thousand Sons, are Traitoris Perdita, and their ability is Kind Shields. Thousand Sons commanders protect models within 6 inches, with a 6+ invulnerable save against shots from models outside the 6 inches. This affects all models, including your primary army, other allies, as well as enemies. The primary reason that I dislike this rule is the potential to slow down games, as models may be forced to roll attacks individually, You also wouldn't use an allied armored company since it doesn't have a commander. Only about 20% of the weapons have a profile of -3 AP or better, so there are relatively few situations where the invul save is an improvement. So when would you field an allied Thousand Sons? I actually think this is one of the best complements to any Solar Auxilia army. Many of the SA infantry suffer from low saves. So for example, imagine a Legion garrison force formation, once the Bastion models are released, holding a backline objective, while the Astartes commander escorts Ogren and other Solar Auxilia infantry from a pioneer company forward for an assault. With some good positioning, you might even be able to protect some vehicles against some of their bigger guns. All in all, it's worse, however situationally better, because I think they're one of the best Solar Auxilia supports, if you're not taking a Knight, Titan, or something else. The 16th Legion, Sons of Horus, are Traitoris Maximus, greatest traitor. And while the Sons of Horus are considered a traitor legion, from what I have read, the 16th Legion has a unique position for modeling and painting. Again, I'm not deep into the lore, but if you wanted to make a loyalist legion with this specific rule set, you could paint them as Luna Wolves. Look it up, it's a thing. Their legion's special rule is to reroll 1s, which may look pretty good at first glance. It does have 3 qualifiers: on advance, within 6 inches, and light or light AT. This ability is quite limited compared to most, but that can be a great way to find direction when building an allied formation. You are encouraged to make a quick strike attacking force, which can push aggressively toward objectives. For example, a Fire Raptor that chooses the Gravis autocannon has 3 weapons, totaling 12 dice, that can feasibly gain some firepower. Rhinos with either the standard bolter or Havoc launcher are another great option. Legionaries, plasma gunners, missile launchers, terminators, assault marines stand to benefit from this rule. Once you look into it, that's a lot of units. Contemptors and Leviathans are okay too, but I actually think this is the only force that I would skew toward Derrideo Dreadnoughts. I actually think Derrideo are a subpar unit, but Sons of Horus can utilize them really well. At 85 points, you have 20 short-range dice ready to benefit from rerolls in those 4 units. Lastly, you can find benefit in taking heavy bolters on your vehicles. This can be a huge deterrent against charging infantry because you choose the point at which you overwatch. All in all, I'm giving them a rating of better because they have a pretty good faction identity that has a lot of good fire output and can be used well. The 17th Legion, Wordbearers, Traitoris Maximus, greatest traitor. Another legion with a versatile rule because detachment type doesn't matter. They have the True Believers ability, never count as broken, and I'll put a little asterisk on that, and ignore Dread Aura. Note that broken says detachments may only advance or charge, while Wordbearers states that broken formations may only advance or charge. It's possibly a typo in one place or the other. Honestly, pretty negligible. Because the True Believers rule specifically states that it never counts as broken only when receiving orders, a Wordbearer's detachment that loses an engagement still rolls 2d6 and must choose the lower result to determine if it withdraws from the engagement. I don't know if their lore supports this type of reckless abandon even when losing, but I feel this rule could simply say never counts as broken, and it would be just as fine. Consequently, I think smaller, tightly grouped formations are best for Wordbearers, which works well as an allied contingent. You'll want to keep your leader alive for the morale value. And lastly, it should be noted that the Dread Aura trait affects friends and foes, so we can expect some growth in their identity and playstyle. All in all, I'll give them an equal to rating, but with some future potential. The 18th Legion of Salamanders is Fidelitas Totalis, with total loyalty. The 13th Legion gets spoiled with 2 awesome rules. First off, when making a morale check, a Salamander's detachment rolls 2d6 and chooses. Additionally, all detachments gain Implacable, and it doesn't matter what type they are. This rule is versatile because the rule doesn't dictate which detachments you must bring, but you'll want to use dreadnoughts, tanks, and other mid-range units supported by infantry. Giving Implacable to Leviathan Dreadnoughts is one of the least expensive ways to destroy garrison buildings with their Wrecker ability, and one that I'm a huge fan of using. The boost to morale offsets their primary danger of taking minimum-sized formations, and their ability is called Strength of Will. All in all, I think Salamanders are pretty solid, and rank them among the best. 2 left to go, the 19th Legion, Ravengard, are Fidelitas Constantus, and their ability is by wing and talon. Detachments containing only infantry gain infiltrate, cavalry, walker, and infantry detachments with dedicated transports gain forward deploy. Something to remember is that when using infiltrate, you may only garrison structures within your deployment zone, notably detachments that benefit greatly from positioning. Tarantulas, since they're infantry, assault marines, since they have the jump pack trait, tactical marines with terminators or missile launchers, rapier batteries for early first fire orders, maybe even dedicated transports for rhino rushes. Things like that are going to perform well with Ravengard. All in all, I think they are rated as better than any of their alternatives because the favorable positioning performs extremely well in the vast majority of missions. Adding a single Ravengard demi company to any army is quite possibly the best ally and can dictate the pace on the battlefield. Last but not least, we have the 20th Legion, Alpha Legion, Traitors Perdita, the Lost Traitor. Their ability is Mutable Tactics, which requires only Alpha Legion. In fact, this has no effect as an ally. It's a very strong primary armor rule, however, since it has no effect unless all of your formations are Alpha Legion, consequently, it becomes a terrible allied contingent for strengthening your army. Unless you tend to paint a model for theme or rule of cool, it's absolutely better to take any other type of formation. I know this video got a little bit long, and I appreciate anyone sticking to it, but that's all I have for today. Adieu.